Namaskar and a very good morning to all of you. To the four ambassadors, the Consul General, the Deputy Permanent Representatives, the diplomats, my colleagues, my friends, and to the Indian community. It's really a great pleasure to be here. As Ambassador Bakchi told you, this project took a little while really to be realized, and I thought I should go and check up on it myself to see whether it's really done. And I'm glad to see it is well done. Now, this morning, we obviously formally dedicated the Chancellery. And I had the privilege of paying homage to Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar, whose statue is just outside this hall. And the naming of this hall after Hansa Mehta. In a way, I want you to think of all these as reflecting what is also happening at home in India. Meaning, just like we have built a chart, modern India is also getting built brick by brick, step by step, building by building. Just as we pay homage to our Dr. Ambedkar here, the cause of social justice, the idea of inclusive growth, of rule of law is gaining ground and is today very central to the policies and activities of the government. And just as we honor Hansa Mehta, today in India, not just the idea of gender equality or gender justice, but the idea of women-led development. This was actually our big push when we had the G20 presidency last year. And we were really very pleased to see that it was a strain of thinking that we were able to successfully inculcate into the international community. So even as we take satisfaction in the event today, I want to remind you that in a way it's a sort of microcosm of what is happening at home. Now, something else happened at home recently. It was called the general election. I think you would have all noticed it. But again, I want you to think about it, that after 6 decades, a government was elected for a third successive term. That in itself is a statement worth reflecting upon. But what it has done is, on the one hand, it's made us ready to go from day one. And I'll like to share with you some thoughts there. That initiatives, programs, progress starts really the moment the term of office begins. 2, it's an important moment to look back. If you are beginning a third term, there are lessons, there are achievements, there are even shortcomings from the first 2 terms. And it's something one needs to objectively look at and learn from it and see really, how that can serve for the path ahead. And third, which I'm sure all of you agree, I think, when we look at the conduct of our elections, the enormous scale, the very heated arguments, but finally, the very ready acceptance of the results. Because ready acceptance of results apparently is no longer the global norm. So we do say things to each other. There are different points of view. But finally, I think we have as Indians every right to be proud of our democratic exercise, the integrity of it, the scale of it, and the efficiency of it in many ways. So those were really, in a way, thoughts that I had, I felt I should share with you. I'm also conscious, I'm both today at, in a way, at the center of globalization, multilateralism, globalism in a way. It is also something which obviously focuses my thinking today, and also that I am in Switzerland, a country which has in many ways achieved so much, from which where there is so much potential in our partnership, and I'd like to say a few words about that as well. Now, let me begin. Elections over. So what was it really about, and what is it really thereafter? Now, I would say the conversations that took place during the election and after the election actually are conversations. What are we capable of? What is holding us back? What is the pathway which we should take? What motivates us? What is the speed really at which we go? How do we particularly address our demographic advantages? How do we create a demographic reality into a demographic dividend? What should be the levels of confidence in the country? And if the confidence is inadequate, what should we do to raise it? How we, everybody would agree we should have growth, but how do we make growth more inclusive? And how do we, in a way, address the challenges of yesterday, today, and tomorrow at the same time? Because the challenges of yesterday are still there, because they are so enormous, and in many ways they have been incompletely addressed in the past. The new challenges keep coming up every day. But if we keep looking back, or only looking for the day, we are really not planning for the day ahead. And we will constantly remain behind the curve. So really, how do we do all of this? And I think today, particularly the role of technology, what technology has done for governance, for delivery of public services, for ease of living, for ease of business, to create new jobs, I think these are all really part of the conversation today in India. And let me start in a way by that looking back, as I said, for us, we've been 10 years in office. And when we look back, as I said, there's a lot that has been achieved. But these building blocks, the bricks and mortars, which you spoke about for this building, those bricks and mortars are also being put in place in India. And I want to share with you, I can speak, you would say, okay, there's one more minister who says very nice things. So I want to give you some figures, because there is a certain exactitude, a certain accuracy, even a certain belief which comes out of figures. And I've tried in a way to take different sectors in the last 10 years and try to reduce it to some figures. So let me share about 7 or 8 of these figures with you. And of course, the overarching figure is, okay, in these 10 years, our GDP doubled. But look at the bricks and mortars, okay. Our high-speed road corridors in these 10 years have increased by 8x. That from 550 kilometers, today they are 4,300 kilometers. If you look at the metros in the country, 10 years ago, there were 6 metros, there are 21 now. There were 550 kilometers, there were 250 kilometers then, there are 950 kilometers now. If you look at the port handling, it's almost doubled in this period. Airports, and many of you would travel to India, actually airports have doubled in this decade. And when you say airports have doubled in this decade, that means you actually, on average, building 7 to 8 new airports a year. Okay. I just came from Germany, but they're very proud that they built an airport in Berlin. It took them, I think, 4 years or something. So I mention this because these are indicative of really the speed of the changes. We speak about, and it's something which every one of us relates to. Most, people like me, people like my colleagues here, we all live abroad, we go back to India, and what has been our refrain for so many years, is, oh, it was so nice there to come back here, and what am I going through? Now you're going through a country where 28 kilometers of new highways are being built every day, where 12 to 14 kilometers of rail track are being laid every day. So if you look, and I'm not even talking Vande Bharat and the better quality of trains. So I want to share with you this sense that, look, the bricks and mortar part, the infrastructure, something which has held us back, which every one of you has personally experienced. That is changing. But changing that is not enough, because at the end of the day, countries, societies are about people. So how are the people changing? Now, the people changing is particularly important because, we are a young country. I mean, we are today on median age, about at least 10 years younger than almost every other major economy in the world. And in fact, in the next 20 years, 25 years, actually the gap will grow. We will be even 15 years younger than most major economies. So what have we done in terms of human resources? What lies in a way ahead of us? And it's again important to look here at achievements. Achievements not to satiate, but to motivate. Not to say I've done well, aha, so I'm done. But to say I've done well, and I could have done so much more. And if I could have done this in 2 terms, how much more can I do in a 3rd term? So I can tell you the intent today is actually to speed it up, to ramp it up, to increase it, to keep telling ourselves that what we have done is just a beginning. I mean, there is no intention of resting on whatever laurels they may be. And I again want to talk to you about it because I must tell you, when I travel around the world, and you would have noticed I do a fair deal of that, most of my counterparts, most of the presidents and prime ministers I meet, yes, we do the foreign policy bit, that's the professional part of it. But they are enormously interested actually in what is happening in India. It'll amuse you. Sometimes the conversation, even the words, are very similar. I had the leader of a very major Arab country actually say, we have food distribution system, and Minister, you don't know how much leakage we have. The word leakage immediately resonated for me. Because he was very interested, how do we today manage the food support, the Anna Yojana, where, today they are covering 830 million people. How do we manage that with actually much less leakage than there's ever been in the past? Or people who ask today, how have you improved your income tax collection? Because, every president and prime minister is interested in increasing the revenues. So again, when I look back at these 10 years, yes, there have been changes for the good in our country. But I also say to all of you that those changes actually globally resonate. That other countries today look with deep interest. They may not be able to exactly copy it, but somewhere in what we are doing, there are lessons for the rest of the world. And if people feel this country, which, bear in mind, which is still at $3,000 per capita income, below that, is able to do that much, we really need to look at what they are doing. And again, let me give you some numbers, because I feel numbers in a way are a better sort of indication of progress. I mean, all of us do it in our daily lives and in our professions. If you take, medical colleges in India, and again, all of us want good doctors, as many doctors around us as possible. They've actually increased when in 2014 there were 387, there are 706 today. If you look at all India medical institutes, which many of us are familiar with, we go to it in India, they've actually tripled from 7 to 22 in this same period. In fact, the number of students, people going for PG and MBBS degrees have doubled in this period. The higher secondary schools have grown by 60%. And if you look today, and schools with computers, which was about a quarter of the total schools in India 10 years ago, are today almost half. And, since we were talking about Hansa Mehta, today if you look at school enrollments in India, for the first time more girls are enrolled than boys. In fact, if you look at even higher education, the number of girls, the females in higher education has gone up by 32% in this period. So I'm sharing with you this, and everything I said medical, the same thing holds true for technical. That you actually have pretty much, if you look at the education and skills sector, whatever was the baseline of 2014, I make this as a broad proposition, in the last 10 years has actually got doubled. Now, if we could do that, doubling in 10 years, and with that as a base and all the experience, of course you can see that, the coming term, when we say, okay, we are heading towards Viksit Bharat, developed India, we have today the confidence, the experience to really do very much better than that. So, again, I've sort of given you one part of the story, the institution building, the hard infrastructure. I've given you the human resources side. But all of us also know, in many ways, that we are a country still where poverty is a very big challenge. Again, we have made progress in this period. 250 million people have come out of poverty. But it's not enough to come out of poverty. We have, what is regarded as the daily necessities of life, that itself should go up. The baseline needs to go up if we have to go up as a society. And what you are actually seeing in India, I don't know if you have given thought to it. You often hear about programs, you would read that the number of, say, prenatal programs have increased. After birth, the nutrition for mother and child has improved. The health facilities at basic levels have improved. What I want to tell you is at every level today, from pre-birth to post-job, there are interventions. I mean, we just had a decision last week that people over 70 would get free healthcare. So that's that extreme of it. If you start from nutrition to, cleanliness, to basic health, primary health, to education, to retention of students in school, to skilling. And each one of these, it's again not a slogan. It is not a good intention. It is not, a poster sticker that you announce on Independence Day and say, okay, I made that declaration. Every one of these today has a figure, has a number. We can tell you it has this many people who benefit from it. When COVID hit all of us, one of our very early cabinet meetings on COVID, the Prime Minister actually asked us all to read up on the Spanish flu before we sat down for that meeting, and reminded us. He said, more people died of starvation in the Spanish flu than they actually died of the flu. And that was something we could not allow, it to happen again. So we actually started a nutrition and a food access program, which has since become permanent. Now, there are other countries, people, even in developed countries, people give food stamps. There are ways of supporting the weaker, vulnerable sections. But we ourselves must understand today that this is a country which is taking care of 830 million people, their food requirements day after day. And just think cumulatively what it will do to the health and nutrition and the physical well-being and all the capabilities which will come out of that. You are all aware of the Ujjwala program, the firewood. I mean, to burn firewood in an enclosed building is almost medieval. I mean, other than the health implication. Now, look at the scale. To replace for 100 million homes firewood burning with gas cylinders. I mean, look at the enormity of it. So, if you see many of these schemes, again, we expect in developed countries. I mean, I was just a few days ago in Singapore, and Singapore is one of those countries where development and housing was a very integral part of the evolution of Singapore. The idea today of having a house as a basic right, that is a big jump for us. And yet it is a jump which is happening. If you look at the last 10 years, at the rate of 4.8 individuals a family, which is our average size, 160 million people are living in homes that they did not have 10 years ago. So these numbers which I'm giving you, these are the populations of countries, sometimes of continents. And that's the kind of change today which we have shown ourselves capable of unleashing. And if we can do that today, think of the possibilities that await us, and think of the, really of the starting point today as we begin our third term. It is so much really better than where it was before. Now, as I said, because it's a third term, we were ready to go. And already, I think some of the big initiatives tell you something about where we think we should be and how we relate to the world. We have announced 12 major industrial zones across the country, which we hope that we build these industrial parks if necessary, with a collaboration of international partners, and use this really to attract global manufacturing to the country. Second, a very major skills initiative. Skills not just as what would the government do in terms of skill centers, that would be the obvious one, but really try to include private sector, try to include global business, try to use internships and support systems of various kinds to actually make the working population much more capable and employable. Third, of course, keep improving the logistics, because I gave you some numbers, but the numbers look good because they are on an earlier base which was very much lower. But now with the new base, we need better numbers, and we need to keep those numbers going. So more ports, more railway lines, more roads, and in many cases we are actually correcting historical, I would say, shortcomings. If you look at the western coast of India, there are virtually no deep water ports along the entire western coast. Now, considering that so much of our shipping today goes out to the Gulf and to the Western world, it is something which is a crying need, and yet it was something which is not addressed for so long. But now there are plans today to really develop a whole port network centered particularly along a port called Vadhavan. Or, as I said, think for tomorrow. So we are today looking at, say, I'm giving you as an example, semiconductors. That if you see the importance today of semiconductors to the global economy and all the associated industries that come from it, there are business implications, there are skill and employment implications, but there are very deep technology implications. That if we are to go ahead, we need to build those deep strengths, and semiconductors, again, we started something in the 1980s. We stopped in the 1980s. Some of the institutions which were last done were done probably at the time of Indira Gandhi, Rajiv Gandhi. And then it stopped there. They didn't take it forward. So the point I make is we are today looking ahead, looking at our present situation, trying to correct what we have inherited, the shortcomings we inherited. And we can see the world is responding. One of the interesting revelations, you would read about something called the Global Capability Centers. Today you have close to about 2,000, somewhere 1,800, 1,900 global capability centers established by international business in India. And they are actually generating exports probably to the tune of about $150 billion. Because the world today realizes India is a great production base. Now we have to make it better. It won't happen by itself. We have to make it easier to do business, which we are trying. We have to, reduce the levels of bureaucracy. We have to improve the logistics. We have to create that platform because business, we have to compete in the world really for business. And that is something, which we are seeing. Now, some of you would be thinking, maybe there's a mistake, maybe, why is the foreign minister talking about all these things? None of this sounds like foreign policy. And I'll tell you why. Because at the end of the day, when you go out in the world, what does the world look at? They look at your capabilities. If your capabilities are not strong, the best English doesn't compensate for it. And they look at confidence. And that confidence comes from capability. They look at, in a way, at your calculations. That judgment, the relationships you have, how you look at the world, how do you assess it, how do you calculate with whom you are, what is the quality of your relationship. These are actually factors on how foreign policy is decided. So for me, every brick and every mortar, every better equipped person in India, everybody with better health, better roof, better condition of life, and therefore a greater ability to contribute, is actually part of the cards I hold in my hand when I go out of India and deal with other countries. So for me, all that happens at home is actually the basis on which foreign policy is conducted. Now, as I said, it requires hard work. It doesn't happen in a day. We are struggling with some issues. There's a big debate in our country about manufacturing. Now, the fact is, there are people who would say, why are we importing so much from China? Part of it is because we neglected manufacturing through the 1960s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, and maybe even the first decade of 2000. Think back, all of you are as connected and have as good a memory about our country as I do. When did we actually have governments who made a major push on manufacturing? And yet there are people who today come and say, no, we need to find a fix, as though it's something you can do instantaneously. In fact, and there are, by the way, people who actually also say that we are incapable of it. We should not even attempt it. So now ask yourself, can you actually be a major power in the world without manufacturing? Because a major power needs technology. Nobody can develop technology without developing manufacturing. But yet, you have that strain of thought also. So, as I said, it requires, until we develop the human resources, it requires hard work. Until you build the infrastructure, until you have those policies. So life is not khatakhat. Life is hard work. Life is diligence. Anybody who's held a job and labored at it knows it. So that's my message to you, that we have to work hard at it. But I'm also conscious I'm in Geneva and I need to say a few things about what's happening here. And as Ambassador said, I've last day met a number of heads of international organizations. So I want to share a few thoughts about what happens in Geneva, how do we relate to it, what are the conversations, what are our interests. Thank you. So now this could be a talk in itself. So I limited myself to three or four issues. So let me start with human rights. It's a very big subject in this city, rightly so. Human rights should be debated. After all, everything I have been talking to you is about human rights. But when it comes to human rights, India is actually a very unique society. And I'll tell you why. Because if you look at the history of the world, with the exception of India, maybe somebody else, I'd be open to that suggestion. But I would say probably with the exception of India, every other society has put an enormous emphasis on uniformity. When people think of a country, they think of one language, they think of one faith, they think of one ethnicity. Homogeneity is supposed to be about nationhood. This is universal. Even countries who have a range of people, a range of languages, actually impose that larger uniformity construct on their entire society. I don't have to give you any names, just look at the map of the world, look at big countries and you get the answer. We are the only people who have not done it. And I tell you, that's the first and most basic human right. We have allowed, encouraged, facilitated, accepted people with diversity to continue in that diversity. So, my point when I look at human rights is to try to politely and hopefully convincingly tell people, you know what, I'm actually in a much better starting point than any of you. Because you actually have suppressed or distorted or underplayed much of the diversities and divergences and pluralisms in your society. I have that. Now, because I have that, I will also have the accompaniment. I would have the argumentation. I would have, the debates in my society. Others may have less, but they have less because actually they have suppressed it or they have eliminated it. When I have divergences, pluralism and diversity, the conversations in that society will necessarily be different from those societies which don't have and never valued that kind of divergence. The second, of course, is that a lot of the conversations on human rights are built, I would say, these are, in a way, you can say post-predatory conversations, that after you've dealt with the whole world for centuries, now you can come back to Geneva and give lectures to other people. But it is something we need to look at, because I think it's important to get our narrative out, to have our message out. If we, are underconfident, or if we start actually running down our own country in public, we're not going to have those conversations. Because if you start running down your country in public, 192 other countries will join you in running down your country as well. And international relations diplomacy is competitive. So I do feel that, look, we are a democracy. We are a 1.4 billion people plus. There will be flaws, there will be shortcomings, there will be mistakes. There will be things which, somebody can reasonably object to. That is part of our growth and part of our learning. But it should not become a kind of a tactic, a kind of gamesmanship to put India on the back foot. And that is what sometimes we see. So when it comes to human rights, where there is an honest conversation, we're always open to it. But when you get down to these rankings and ratings and so on, those are not honest conversations. Those are mind games, which are actually played out for a political purpose. The second domain which I spent some time talking about was health. And again, we have tried really to expand our health coverage. We have this program called Ayushman Bharat. Now, in the years, it's not been there for long, but again, you have to visit India, and particularly non-big city India, to understand how much of an impact it has made. Just 5 years ago, the footfalls which we used to get on Ayushman Bharat programs were 135 million. Last year, it was in excess of 1.2 billion. So it's actually grown 10x in the course of the last 5 years. And I think it will keep growing at that rate, if not more. Health costs are a very major issue to everybody. We actually have created a model where you have stores. There are today, I think, 13,000 stores across India which sell generic medicines at costs which are normally about a quarter or a third of what you would actually get the same medicine in the same city if you go to a normal pharmacist. Now, it's a government's effort at inventory management, at making something essential, affordable and accessible to the people. Now, I mentioned these two because when we have conversations about health in India, I want to tell you that there's a lot of interest today. Just as I told you, somebody is interested, how is there no food leakage, or how is it that your payments are delivered, your loans are given to people. There's a lot of interest. In a sense, it's like a best practices conversation on what's happening on health. And of course, there is the issue of traditional medicine. We are very proud that, and also we take it as a responsibility that WHO selected Jamnagar as the center for the Global Traditional Medicine Center. It is something which we take seriously. We had our first summit, Traditional Medicine Summit last year, and we want to take it forward. A third area is ITU. I think some of you are associated here with it. And again, look at the telecom sector. Till a few years ago, you look at 2G, 3G, 4G. We were importers of all three. Yet when you put your mind to it, within the space of a few years, we are actually able to come up with a 5G stack. It's not a small achievement. Look around the world, how many countries actually have created a 5G stack? And if you look today at the rollout, we had a telecom conference and both the heads of Nokia and Ericsson were there. I mean, they were frankly, they were staggered at the speed of the 5G rollout today in the country. So for us again, last year the ITU opened its South Asia area office and innovation center in Delhi. We think it's a very good thing. And this year we are looking forward to hosting the ITU's World Telecommunication Standardization Assembly next month in India. So why I'm mentioning this is, and let me again say a few words about WIPO. Again, we have collaborated with WIPO to open 34 technology and innovation support centers in India. We actually hosted the WIPO patent adjudication masterclass in Delhi. So, there is today this big effort. If you look at the patents numbers coming out of India, those numbers are actually growing up very sharply because there is very strong government motivation to do that. So I mention this because this India that I put to you, one where we are honest about our challenges, but we are very determined to address them, where we look at our review, look and review what we have done. We obviously, take satisfaction at what we have achieved, but that serves as a motivation for what we have not yet achieved. And when, in all of this is an India which wants to engage more with the world. We see the world as a partner who can accelerate development in India, who can help us leapfrog in many areas, because we need to leapfrog. We cannot grow organically, we cannot grow evolutionary. We need those big jumps which will actually catapult us into much higher spaces. And there, I want to tell you that Switzerland is actually a very important partner. It's an important partner for a variety of reasons. I mean, I think all of you recognize today that Switzerland has a certain standing and credibility in the global community. I mean, people associated with certain, there is a rigor and a ethic and a standard with which Swiss industry and Swiss practices are associated. So we were very happy when we could actually conclude before the election an FTA with the grouping of countries of which Switzerland was a part. It was in some senses a very unique FTA because it actually it committed to investment in India and to job creation in India, which is normally not done in FTAs. But when we look today at, the industries, especially of the future, when we look at, what, for example, the pharma, the medical industry holds for us, when we look at clean and green technologies, when we look even at logistics, there is a lot. And one other area I must say, which is so obvious when you come to this country, when we look at tourism, that there is a great desire today to build tourism in India. We handled the entire G20 with a view to get foreigners. For us, the people who came to the G20 were probably the most powerful 100,000 influencers of the world. When they traveled across India, as they did to about 100 cities, they presented a picture to India of the world, and we now need to leverage that and see how we can, increase international tourism in the country. So there is a lot for us to gain from international cooperation. I think Switzerland is an excellent example. This is something that I hope to be discussing later this evening. So these were some of the thoughts I thought I would take the opportunity to share with you. I really appreciate your coming here today, the support that you're extending to the mission, the fact that, for us, particularly the world in many ways is updating its impressions of India, its image of India. How we behave at home. If we take the confident, capable, sort of progressive path, that's one kind of image we will present. If we get bogged down in the divides of the past, that's a different kind of image we'll present. Hopefully, they would look at the India which they see, the India of the last 10 years, the India of the future. But all of this, they would judge India by the Indians they meet. Finally, all of us, when we think of any country, we put a face to that country. So you are the faces that they will be putting. So I count on your support, your efforts, your contribution. Once again, I thank you very much for this.
EAM is kindly agreed to take a few questions. If I can have the arrangements in place on the stage quickly.